Yo, welcome back to the Willie Bobo Show. This is going to be the great edition, purely unfiltered. So, of course, you know what time it is with me. I don't sugarcoat things here, and I'm certainly not going to sweep this real issue under the corporate rug. Today, I got to talk about what just went down last week in the sports media landscape, and I had to look past the sanitized focus group narratives being pushed by suits, calling shots behind the scenes. I had to look beyond the regular media coverage until I saw the interview. And of course, what I'm talking about is the sudden, cold blooded, in my opinion, cold blooded firing of Ryan Clark. Now, the mainstream sports complex, they're going to want to point at routine, budget adjustments. They, that it was a tense moment on a studio set. They're going to act like, it was a standard corporate housekeeping move, right? But you got to make it, you got to keep it a buck. Because look, we've seen this movie before. Just like the cultural panic, when a figure like Jalen Brown is labeled too black for Boston, too unapologetic, too self-contained, too unwilling to shrink himself for the comfort of mainstream gaze. And then Ryan Clark found out the hard way. What happens when a black man with an elite pedigree refuses to play the corporate shuffle? He speaks with unvarnished authority and becomes simply too black for the network. Now we got to take a look back at an exact flashpoint, and I'm talking about September the 5th, 2025. Setting, Greenberg's early morning show, my favorite show. Get up. The panel was breaking down the fallout from an opening night NFL matchup between the Eagles and the Cowboys. Now the discussion basically was talking about how AJ Brown, who was with Philly at that time, who's currently now with the Patriots, he secured the victory despite quiet stat lines. And even though the Cowboys lost, C.D. Lamb, he had like 7 catches, 110 yards, or something like that. Okay, but he did commit a brutal game-altering drop in that tight loss. Now, here comes panelist. Okay, and I'm gonna say a panelist stepping in and giving his accolade of C.D. Lamb in a loss like that. And this is where Ryan Clark, a man who spent 13 grueling seasons laying his body on the line in the NFL trenches, a Super Bowl champion, a Pro Bowler, and a black man who carries the hard earned scars and psychological weight of the locker room, stepped in. Now let's look closely at the transcript of what was exchanged on that television show live. Ryan Clark said, and I quote, "The thing is, though, and we shouldn't do this on TV, and I apologize if people think it's rude. That's the non player in you." So that analyst comes back, quote, and pardon me, end quote from Clark, end quote from the analyst. "I'm not looking at fantasy football, Ryan. Don't belittle me like that. I can come in and say, as three ex players are saying one thing, and give an alternative perspective that maybe CeeDee Lamb did play well, end quote. Ryan Clark, quote, what I need for you to do, what I need for you to do is not get mad and let me finish, end quote. So as that conversation tails off, Ryan didn't back down. Okay. He went deeper, explaining the visceral reality of a competitor walking off the field after a loss, stating that when you've lived that life, when your family lives and dies by those trenches also, you view the game through a lens with a box score watcher or a studio pundit who simply can't manufacture the sense to understand. And how did the network and the media establishment react? They clutched their pearls. For months and years leading up to the corporate machinery that had been growing uneasy, Clark wasn't a corporate puppet. He pushed boundaries, he challenged structures, he took up massive space, and he commanded a multi-million dollar valuation because he brought an authentic, unfiltered player's perspective to the forefront. But the moment a black man cuts through the noise of player media darlings telling the absolute unfiltered truth about what actually happens from the game on the inside, the established labels, they call them abrasive, divisive, difficult. Now let's look at what it really is. It's the same script written for athletes and cultural icons who refuse to code or bow down to institutional comfort. Jalen Brown dominated the black play for out there in Boston, played with intellect and pride, and spoke the truth. The media is going to whisper what they want to whisper about, who the type of person that Ryan Clark is and being unapologetically energizing on sports broadcasting. And when it contrasts negotiations on air personality challenges, that comfort zone, it begins to shrink. And they waited for their moment. And their routine broadcast, they dropped the hammer mid show during commercial. Now, they can dress it up as all the things that they want, okay? But when you're too sharp, too authentic, and too deeply rooted in black players' reality to ever truly be managed, the system eventually decides you have to go. That's reality. And that's the truth. And you heard it right here on the Willie Bobo Show. I'll see you next time. Peace.